Hi, this is Chris at handfuloftranquility.com. That happens to be my email address as well. Today we're going to be talking about canning dry beans, pinto beans, black beans, basically any kind of dry beans. Now we need to pick through the beans, remove any shriveled bits like this, any rocks you may find. You would think that there wouldn't be any, but you'd be surprised at what you might find in a can of beans. Here's another bad one. Okay, I've sifted through my beans. In that 4 cups, I found 3 pebbles and 2 dried beans. I can't really get myself in the photos or in the video because I'm having to hold the lens to keep everything in focus. If earlier material wasn't in focus, I do apologize. There are 2 ways to rehydrate your beans. You can either soak them for 12 to 18 hours, or you can boil them and then let them sit for an hour. We're going to let them just sit in cold water for the 12 to 18 hours because it's more...
You're going to want to go ahead and cover the beans with a lot of water. There's only about 2 inches of beans in there, and they're covered with probably at least 3 inches of water. See those floaty bits? You're going to want to go ahead and pick those out. They indicate bad beans and pieces of wood and other debris. So we'll go ahead and remove those.
Okay, our beans are done soaking. I've drained them out. Now we need to rinse them and re-drain them. What this does is it gets all the starches out, and it's the starches that kind of make you gassy. So if you rinse them and then drain them, that'll help prevent that. So we're going to go ahead and rinse them. But first I want to show you some of the dry beans and some of the soaked beans. It's hard to tell, particularly since it's probably kind of blurry. Again, I dropped my camera, and I'm literally holding the lens on with a rubber band right now. But everything's probably doubled in volume. So we're going to go ahead and rinse it out. I'm not going to show that step. And then we need to bring it to a boil and simmer it for about a half hour. Soaking kind of opens the pores up, and then cooking it for a half hour will actually cook the beans. Alright, we've rinsed our beans. It's time to go ahead and turn them on. We're going to cook them for a half hour. We'll start the timer after it comes to a boil. This is also a good opportunity to go ahead and start a pan of water. We'll need that during the canning process. It needs to be just under boiling. We'll have to soak our lids, which will loosen up the goo, and we'll also use some of that water to help preheat our canning jars. Alright, the beans are just about done cooking, so we're going to go ahead and get ready. I have my canner with the jars in there, a little bit of water, and we're starting to go ahead and heat it up. Oh, there we go. We'll go ahead and turn the beans off. Set the lid aside. As I was saying, we have our canner with some water in there. We're going to go ahead and start heating it up. What this does is it heats the jars up so that they won't crack from putting the boiling beans in there. And it also goes ahead and preheats the canner so it'll take less time to get up to temperature. Normally, I would be using a canning funnel, which makes filling the jars a lot easier. However, since I'm in the process of moving, I kind of lost my canning funnel and can't get it out for this video. So I'm going to be improvising. I'm going to be attempting to use this cup that has the bottom cut out. Alright, we're going to go ahead and use our jar lifter. Pour out the hot water. Careful that you don't burn yourself. I have these waterproof insulated silicone baking mitts, which are very handy. Alright, so this jar's hot, but it's not quite scalding. So we'll just go ahead and fill it up. We're going to fill it up to about 1 inch from the top. I'm using a slotted spoon here. That way I get just the solids, and we're going to go ahead and add liquid in a little bit. I want to go ahead and fill all the jars. That way we make sure everything's even. I'm not going to show you this whole process, but alright. We have 3 jars that are pretty much full and 1 partial jar. Your jars don't have to be all the way full with beans. We're going to fill them up all the way with liquid. But it's up to you whether you want to evenly distribute that amongst the jars or if you want to leave one partially full. One trick I have is I get the liquid that we cook the beans in. That's where a lot of the nutrition is. And I just use that to transfer our liquid here. So obviously, since that one didn't have that many beans, it didn't fill up very much of the way. Careful, this jar will get very hot because it's obviously was just boiling. So we'll go ahead and fill these up the rest of the way. Again, you want to leave at least 1 inch of what's called head space. That's what lets it get such a vacuum on it that fully seals the lids. You can see in the bottom of my canner I have a little aluminum disc. This will come with most pressure canners, and it's very important. What it does is it keeps the jars off of the bottom of the canner and out of the direct heat path for the flames. If the jars rest directly on the bottom, they can crack from the extreme heat. Alright, we're going to put our last jar in here. It's partially filled with water, and what this does is it keeps the canner nice and even. That way the jars won't rattle, and that way they're not able to fall over. We need to wipe the rings off with a damp towel that's clean. This gets any little bits of food particle off. We also need to make sure there's no air bubbles inside the jars. So before you put them in, it's a good idea to go ahead and just check. And if they are, you can use the end of a spoon or the handle of a spoon, kind of knock the bubbles loose. If there's any bubbles in here, they can kind of burp, and that'll let the liquids, maybe even the solids, escape from the jar. And if there's any solid particles between the jar ring and the actual lid, then this can keep it from sealing well, which means you'll have to reprocess the jars all over again. Go ahead and use your magnetic lid lifter. Get the lids out, set it on each of the canning jars. Then go ahead and get your rings out as well. The reason we have the lids and the rings in the water is the lids have some rubbery compound in them. The hot water is just shy of boiling. The hot water will help soften that compound up. The rings are made of metal, so if they get hot, they will expand, and you want to go ahead and expand them before we put them in the canner. Uh-oh. And we want to go ahead and tighten these up just finger tight. Just barely finger tight. That'll let the pressure escape, but they'll still seal up well when we're done. Go ahead and put the lid on. Turn the stove on high. And now we wait. Alright, this is called venting. As you can see, the steam is kind of escaping in spurts. And what we want to do is we want to wait until this is continuous steam cloud. Once we get to that point, we set our timer for 10 minutes and let it steam continuously for 10 minutes. After the 10 minutes is up, we'll go ahead and place our weighted gauge on and cook for the appropriate time. Alright, this is about the right frequency for the weighted gauge style canner. This is the Miro style with this heavy weight, and it makes the rattling noise. It can get a little old after a while, but it's something where you want to make it rattle about 1 to 3 times a minute. It needs to rattle fairly regularly. That means it's up to temperature. If you have the Presto style with this weighted gauge right here, it's a lot quieter. Honestly, I thought that's the canner I had. Alright, our timer's off. We go ahead and turn the canner off. You do not want to release this pressure. You don't want to open the lid. You'll get scalded by the steam. You don't want to take the weight off. You don't want to put a cold cloth on there either. Just let it come down in temperature naturally. It'll take about probably an hour or so. If you cool it off too fast, your cans will be too warm. You'll blow liquid out because it'll start instantly steaming. And then you will have wasted the last couple of hours of your time. You'd need to take the lids off, clean them, and repack. So we're just going to let this cool off. Alright, the canner is cooled off. We can tell by just kind of messing with the weight a little bit, and no pressure came out. It's still very hot though, so I'm going to use a towel to take it off. So we'll take the weight off. Nope, no steam releasing. Sometimes it'll start releasing a little bit. So we'll go ahead and take the lid off. Tilt the lid away from you so you don't get burnt by all the steam. The jars may or may not be sealed at this point. We're going to go ahead and carefully take them out. I'm going to use my insulated mitts. Grab them by the rims, not by the lids. You need to set them on the counter. This one's sealed. You can see it's bubbling. That's because it's under a vacuum, which lowers the boiling point of water. So anyway, we just let them sit on the counter until they're fully sealed. And then when they're sealed, you can take the rings off. It's only to hold the lid in place. I hope you enjoyed this. I know it's a little long, and at times the video is a little sketchy because of the broken camera, but hope it's informative. Thanks.